The infinite monkey theorem states that a monkey hitting keys at random on a typewriter keyboard for an infinite amount of time will almost surely type a given text, such as the complete works of William Shakespeare. In this context, almost surely is a mathematical term with a precise meaning, and the monkey is not an actual monkey, but a metaphor for an abstract device that produces a random sequence of letters ad infinitum. The theorem illustrates the perils of reasoning about infinity by imagining a vast but finite number, and vice versa. The probability of a monkey exactly typing a complete work such as Shakespeare's Hamlet is so tiny that the chance of it occurring during a period of time of the order of the age of the universe is minuscule, but not zero. But technologies can help monkeys to write. If the monkeys are given a pen and some papers to spell the word monkey, they can only scratch on the paper. By contrast, if they are given a typewriter, it will take them over 10 years to produce the right spelling. However, if they can use computer programming, they can finish the task within a day. I'm a dietitian and I work in clinical weight loss recently. Accurately estimating portion size is critical in research or real-world settings. For example, if you're trying to watch your weight and you're out to dinner and you're presented with a bowl of food, there's no really good way to actually estimate how much you're eating unless you're gonna whip some scales out of your bag. So we wanted to find a more objective way for people to quantify what they're eating when they're out and about. I came up with a more hands-on approach. We get people to measure the dimensions of the food using the width of their fingers and remembering back to primary school maths. We use the geometric volume formulas to estimate the weight of the food. To show you how this works, I've ordered a piece of lasagna and that's my box, a glass of wine and that's my cylinder. And I'm feeling pretty healthy, so I order some watermelon for dessert. And that's my wedge. So this lasagna, it is 7 by 5 by 4 fingers. In the future, I see this method being incorporated into smartphone applications. So you put your fingers within, along with your height and your weight. And the app will do all of the calculations for you. And then you've got a more accurate way to estimate the portion size.
we can ask two fundamental questions about animal behavior. They referred to as proximate and ultimate. Proximate questions are those concerned with the mechanisms that bring about behavior. Ultimate questions are those concerned with the evolution of behavior. We can divide the proximate and ultimate questions into two sub-questions. For proximate, how does the behavior develop? And secondly, what causes the behavior? For ultimate, you can ask how did the behavior evolve? And secondly, what is the adaptive significance of the behavior? What is purpose? Together these comprise what are called Tinbergen's 4 questions about animal behavior. Knight Tinbergen was one of the founding fathers of the study of animal behavior. These questions represent the different ways of studying animal behavior, and understanding the difference between those 4 questions are fundamental to understanding behavior, and indeed the whole of biology. How do we study animal behavior? Well, that depends on the type of question we're hoping to answer.
This is one picture that you probably all know where it is when you see it. It's a familiar looking image. It is something that we all have some personal experience with, right? This is a chest X-ray that would be taken in your doctor's office, for example, or radiologist's office. And it is a good example of biomedical engineering, and that it takes a physical principle. That is, how do X-rays interact with the tissues of your body, and it uses that physics, that physical principle, to develop a picture of what's inside your body. So to look inside and see things you couldn't see without this device. And you'll recognize some parts of the image. You can see the rib cage here, the bones, you can see the heart is the large bright object down here. If you have good eyesight from the distance, you can see the vessels leading out of the heart and into the lungs, and the lungs are darker spaces within rib cage.
Turner, not surprisingly, painted one of the earliest pictures of London's fog in this 1835 painting, the Thames above Waterloo Bridge. Turner, as a true born Londoner, is advertising his familiarity with London's problem by putting smoke and atmospheric pollution at its centre. And as you can see and hear, the bridge is the central element, which is a theme that's later taken up by Monet and is partly obscured by the steam and smoke which rises from both sides of the river. Here we see a shot tower, I think you can just about see it, which was constructed in 1826. Do you know what shakis are? They produce shotguns and munition, and they were very smoky. One of the most smoking industries, but it's barely visible, as you can see, as are the various industries on the Lambeth side of the river. There's on this side. There's a steamship about to dock or preparing to leave. It's black smoke thrusting up to join the kind of swirling arc of smoke there. William Rodner sees this painting as a potent essay on the energy and complexity of modern polluted urbanism. Smoke, I think, here represents a flourishing economy which brings employment and food on tables, but also the dirt and pollution associated with it, fumes. All seems to be tainted by sulphurous yellow. Even the black plumes of smoke from the two funnels of the steam eye have yellow streaks in them to give them a greater sense of movement and vitality.
But when we move into working with communities, we have to recognize that the communities have to be the authority in their language. Actually, a woman in the class I'm teaching at Sydney at the moment, a career woman, expressed this very nicely. Although she was talking about something else, she was distinguishing expertise from authority. And certainly linguists, because of our training, we do have expertise in certain very narrow areas of language. But we don't have the authority over what to do with that knowledge or what to do with other knowledge that the community produces. I guess for me the bottom line is languages are lost because of the dominance of one people over another. That's not rocket science. It's not hard to work that out. But then what that means is if in working with language revival we continue to hold the authority, we actually haven't done anything towards undoing how languages are lost in the first place. So in a sense the languages are still lost if the authority is still lost.
So when we talk about the Paleo regions, just to clarify exactly what we mean, and we have first of all the Arctic at the top of Earth and Antarctic at the bottom. And so the Arctic was named after the Greek word for bear. Surprisingly, it is not after the polar bears that live in the Arctic. It is after the Little and Great Bear constellations that can be seen in the sky. Now the Greeks also hypothesized that there would be an anti-Arctic, which is how we get the name Antarctica. Of course, it wasn't discovered until much later on. Now these regions are opposite in many ways other than just their names and their location on the globe. So if we look at the Arctic first of all, the Arctic is actually ocean surrounded by land. So you can see here, this is the UK down here, and this is Russia, and then America, Canada around here. So there is a bit of land covered in ice on top in the Arctic, which is Greenland here. All these areas here, surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize that this is not actually land. North Pole isn't on land, it is just one big ocean. So if you have to gauge the North Pole, you can stand on it. If you were to drill down through the ice, you would find ocean beneath it.
This is a kind of object that you're probably all familiar with when you had the term robot, but I'm gonna show you the very first robots. These were the very first robots. They were characters in a play in the 1920s called Rossum's Universal Robots, and the play was written by a Czech writer called Karel Čapek. And basically, these robots, people tend to think of robots as kind of cute cuddly toys or, Hollywood depictions kind of devoid of politics. But the first robots were actually created and imagined in a time of absolute political turmoil. You just had the First World War. It finished and had a devastating impact across Europe, and so people are kind of reflecting on what does it mean to be human? What makes us human? Those kinds of questions. And this kind of context is what inspired Čapek to write this play. And interestingly, these robots being human, they are actually in the play assembled on a production line. a bit like the Ford manufacturing production line. So even though they are human, they are assembled, and these robots are designed to labor, and that is their primary purpose in society.
You can see that the two charts each give quite a different picture of the performance of boys and girls in the two key subjects of maths and English. It shows that in English, girls consistently outperform boys over a period of 6 years, achieving scores about 10% above their male peers. There is quite a different picture when we look at the math result with no real difference between genders in the results. What is the explanation for these key differences? To answer this question, researchers look at biological and cognitive factors and a range of social factors. The interaction between these different components in early childhood development are seen as maintained and reinforced in the school context, and this leads to distinct gender patterns of behavior in skills with direct consequences for school performance and achievement. The argument uses this evidence to show that biological factors such as patterns of cognitive development are closely linked to social factors such as learned gender categories. These cognitive skills are learned through preschool and subsequently at school, supported by the responses of teachers, creating a reinforcement of patterns.
This is Hans Krebs, who in 1937 published a paper showing the sequence of chemical reactions by which energy is released in individual cells. It is called the Krebs Cycle, which some of you may remember from your chemistry course in your high school. Krebs is a wonderful example to me of how a scientist who is determined can overcome all kinds of human obstacles. Krebs's father constantly discouraged him and told him that he had just mediocre intelligence whenever to anything important in his life as a teenager. What Krebs remembers in his memoir, his father said to him, "You can't make a silk purse at a sew's ear." And later on, when Krebs studied with the great biochemist Otto Warburg, Warburg also told him the same thing. Not the same quote, but that he had only mediocre ability and would never be a great scientist. And we all hear about how important it is for parents to encourage their children, but sometimes the children will go on to do great things no matter what we say to them.